Israel was, in a sense, conceived by war. A day after it declared its independence in May 1948, it was attacked by 5 neighboring countries: Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Iraq. What followed were decades of endless wars fought on and near Israeli soil. A war with Egypt in 1956, another with Egypt and Jordan and Syria in 1967, another with Egypt and Syria in 1973, one with Lebanon in 1982, and so on and so on and so on. And on top of various military entanglements with its neighbors, Israel has also been embroiled in various uprisings within its own borders among the Palestinian people. You will recall that famous handshake at the White House, right? Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat and Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin agreeing to a declaration of principles that said the Palestinians would be allowed to govern themselves in 2 areas: in the West Bank, a swath of land along Israel's border with Jordan, and another tiny sliver of land along the Mediterranean Sea that's known as the Gaza Strip. The war being fought at this hour is in that little sliver of land, the Gaza Strip. It's actually only about twice the size of Washington, D.C. Now, Israel withdrew from that land in 2005, but they still control the airspace, the territorial waters, and the Gaza-Israeli border. They're currently enforcing an embargo on the Gaza Strip. Once the Palestinians achieved some degree of independence there, they did what independent people do, what the U.S., in fact, encouraged them to do. They held elections. And in those elections, the ruling nationalist party, Yasser Arafat's party, Fatah, was defeated soundly by Hamas. Now, Fatah was no League of Women voters, but say what you will about them, they did begrudgingly accept, theoretically, Israel's right to exist. Hamas, not so much. Not so much at all. The charter of Hamas explicitly calls for the destruction of Israel. Hamas is listed as a terrorist organization by both the United States and the European Union. The net result of that election for Israel, yet another neighbor bent on its complete destruction. Israel says rockets and mortars lobbed from Gaza into Israel killed 9 Israeli civilians since the beginning of this year. A shaky ceasefire between Gaza and Israel that had been brokered by Egypt that expired just a little more than a week ago. On Saturday, then, there was a surprise broad daylight coordinated air assault by the Israeli military on what Israel says were military targets in Gaza. Another round of headlines that scream chaos in the Middle East. Chaos in the Middle East erupts again. More than 300 dead on the Palestinian side in the last 3 days. 3 confirmed dead so far on the Israeli side. Israel's critics decry a disproportionate response to the rocket fire. An emboldened Iranian Ayatollah Khamenei says that any Muslim who dies in defense of Gaza would be deemed a martyr. Israel's defenders decry the Hamas government's refusal to recognize Israel's right to exist and, of course, the unprovoked missile fire into southern Israel. Today, Israel's United Nations ambassador said the goal of Israel's military offensive is to, quote, destroy completely Hamas. Meanwhile, Palestinian rocket fire into Israel continued despite the massive Israeli military attack. Now, as President Bush refuses to interrupt his last vacation as president to say anything about the Middle East tinderbox he purports to focus on so intently, is there hope that our new presidential leadership in our country could make a difference there? Or is this a situation in which there will always be violence, which precludes a political solution? And without a political solution, we can't ever have anything but more violence. Do you think that our kids and their kids and their kids will inevitably read the same headlines from the Middle East that we do now and that we have for so many years? Joining us now is NBC Chief Foreign Correspondent Richard Engel. Richard, thanks for being here.
Oh, so I have to sort out the Middle East.
Yeah, so you've got a couple of minutes. Hit it.
Exactly. To get right into it,
Please.
I think the situation in Gaza is explosive. It appears to be contained, but people in Gaza and in Israel expect that there will be a ground offensive and that it could be fairly soon, that it could come in the next 48 hours or so.
Does that mean that this is going to go on for a very long time? Is there any possibility that that could be, even if it is a massive ground incursion, could it be a short one?
Probably. The Arab world, it seems that a lot of Arab states, in particular Egypt, Saudi Arabia, gave a green light to this offensive. So
really?
While there's a lot of uproar in the streets, the Arab governments aren't saying very much. And Israel's foreign minister was in Egypt meeting with Egypt's president the day before Israel began this offensive. So there is a lot of uproar on a popular level because the media, the television, all the newspapers it's a constant drumbeat of horrific images coming out of Gaza. So the Arab governments can only tolerate so much for so long.
Why would they have greenlit something like this?
They don't support Hamas. They preferred the Fatah government, the Palestinian Authority, which rules the West Bank. If you look at the map, which you've provided me again, I'm so sorry about this. There is Hamas government there, and then in the West Bank you have the Palestinian Authority. So two governments, two rival states in a state that isn't even connected to itself, and the moderate Arab states, so the U.S. allies, the Sunni states in general, support the government in the West Bank and not Hamas. Hamas is really close friends, have turned out to be Iran and Hezbollah and some friends in Syria, and that's about it.
So the Palestinian leadership in the West Bank, which as we're seeing, as we can see on the map, is a much larger territory than the Gaza Strip, they are not on Hamas's side.
They were shooting yesterday at demonstrators, Palestinians, who were coming out in support of Hamas.
Are we in a situation here, both in the Palestinian territories and in the surrounding governments, where the people want something very different than the leadership?
The people across the Arab world, I think there's a big disconnect between what the people want and what the leadership wants. Unfortunately, it is a region where there is a large problem of ignorance, of poverty, of chauvinism, of all the terrible things that you have in the developing world, and in a leadership of an elite that is mostly Western educated. So there is a huge discrepancy, and that comes out when there's a time of crisis like you have now, where there are millions of people in Egypt who are horrified and want to act by what is going on in Gaza, but the leadership in Cairo is in a position where they don't want to act.
Right, and we see these giant demonstrations in Beirut. We had the Yemeni government say that they had 1 million people turn out demonstrating in support of the people of Gaza.
You will not see Egyptian F-16s flying over Gaza anytime soon, nor will you see the Jordanian military invading to take off any of the military pressure.
But yet we have this situation in the Gaza Strip, which is a small area, a very densely populated area, where the Israelis say Hamas is firing rockets under cover of the civilian population. And if there are civilian casualties, it's because Hamas is essentially hiding among the civilian population there.
Well, Hamas's members are civilians. So that distinction it's not a uniformed army. There are probably, according to U.S. intelligence estimates, 10,000 fighters. And then there's another 15,000 or so people who belong to the Palestinian security services. So we're talking about 25,000 fighting force, 10,000 of which are dedicated directly to Hamas. But these are people who are from Gaza. I've spent a lot of time in Gaza. It's a densely populated area. It's one of the most densely populated in the world. So if you're fighting from northern Gaza, most of this fighting, the Israelis have their positions around the edges of Gaza, and most of the fighting has been so far in this this northern portion of the Gaza Strip up there.
So looking at the geographic considerations here, thinking about the political considerations here, what's already happened, the divides that we know are there, the fact that it is a hot war right now. There is bombing going on right now, and there are casualties the casualties still unfolding. We'll be looking at a lot more if there is a ground incursion. Is there any point where it's possible for there to be a break in the violence, retaliation, revenge, retaliation, violence cycle? I
think that this will be left up to, and a lot of it has to come down to American leadership, and it has to come down to what is now the new administration to be coming in. And if I were in their position, and I've heard grumblings that they are interested in doing this, you might want to dust off that Baker-Hamilton report, the Iraq Study Group report, which was criticized at the time because it didn't call for the surge in Iraq. And a lot of people didn't agree with the fact that since it was against the surge, people have tried to discredit it. A lot of the rest of that report, I think, is very interesting and has some incredible value to it. And it talks about a grand bargain in the Middle East. And if you look at the map, you were talking about this dangerous geography we have. Gaza is just one of the main contentious points. Then there's the West Bank, the Golan Heights. It's mostly about land and about creating some sort of bargain. And I think a new administration that goes in with a more pragmatic approach, not trying to conquer and achieve peace through ideology, through spreading democracy, but looking at the actual real estate that needs to be swapped, the people that need to be, the aggrieved populaces that need to be addressed. I think there is a chance to start a new approach, and eliminating as a direct threat Hamas and its missiles from the Gaza Strip in an odd way could end up helping moderates if this operation doesn't prove to be a terrible bloody massacre.
Richard Engel, NBC chief foreign correspondent.